Hey everyone, today we are back at the Coffs Historical Cemetery and I'd like to tell you the story of Frank Edgar Anderson. Frank was the seventh child of Sam and Alice Anderson, who we started this story off with. Frank was born in 1897 in Bellawongarah on the south coast of New South Wales and made the journey north with his family when he was barely a teen. Frank had little schooling and left home at an early age. He was unable to read or write. He had a variety of jobs to about 1925 when he selected just under 50 acres of virgin land at the foot of Red Hill near Coffs Harbour, which he commenced clearing in preparation for planting bananas. By the end of 1926, Frank had met and married Linda Savins, a single mum with a little boy called Lawrence. Frank had already built a house on the land that he'd cleared prior to his marriage, and Frank and Linda's first child, Lance, was tragically born and died in that house. Their next three children, Marjorie, Sandy and Joan, were born while they lived at Red Hill. Frank had 8 acres under bananas, and in the early 30s he was doing really well. He employed men to assist him with the bananas, clearing land, planting more bananas. He borrowed money from the bank to improve the property, but when the Great Depression struck and things went terribly wrong, they had to sell out, preempting a foreclosure from the bank. In Frank's spare time, when it was too wet to work outside, Linda, who had a full primary school education, taught him to read and write from her Bible. After the property was sold, the family moved to Sawtell, renting a house on Lyons Estate. They later moved to Holberts, now Chalmina, and while at Holberts, their next 3 children, Joyce, Roma and Dawn, were born. During the Depression, Frank, like many others, was not in permanent employment. He supported his family by taking whatever jobs he could get, and he worked on the Unemployed Relief Work Scheme. This scheme shared whatever work was available amongst the unemployed, usually in the nature of government-funded public works. By 1938, Frank had a job with the railway department, so the family moved back to a rented house on the Lyons estate. Frank's new job caused him to be away from his family living at railway construction sites. The twins, Heather and Frank, were born during this period. Linda became unwell, and her need for frequent treatment made it necessary for the family to move to the city, so they moved to Reesbury, Sydney in 1942, where Frank worked at the Chillara railway workshops. As Linda's health deteriorated, she became too ill to care for their children, so her mother took over the role and helped nurse Linda until her death in 1945 at the age of 40. Shortly after Linda's death, Frank was to marry Alma Muriel Moore, who brought 2 sons into her marriage with Frank. Frank's health was deteriorating from the dust on his lungs from sandblasting involved in his work at Chillara, and by 1948 he was no longer able to work, so he was granted the invalid pension. In 1949 it was decided to shift the family back to the country, so they moved to Bobo for a short period, but by 1952 the family had moved to Moonee Beach. In 1954, Alma left the family, going back to Sydney. After a long relationship with Mona Holden, Frank married her in Coffs Harbour on the 29th of April 1971. Frank loved fishing and gardening. He also loved to play his button accordion. He lived at Moonee Beach until his death in 1978, and he's buried beside his 3rd wife in the Coffs Harbour Historical Cemetery. At the time of his passing, Frank left 9 surviving children and 36 grandchildren to mourn his loss. Frank's and Linda's son Lance is buried beside Frank's parents Sam and Alice in the same Presbyterian section of the Coffs Historical Cemetery.